Shira Levine,
Yeah!
giving the time up tonight. All right, cool.
If you look under your seat, everyone gets a Toyota. Everyone. Okay, I never need a mic, but if you can't hear me, please say something, and I'm going to try to stay in the frame of the camera as well. I'm Shira Levine. I'm delighted to be here. Chris is a fast friend, an incredible entrepreneur, our leader, the community manager of the entrepreneur community. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
The ladies from Holding Redlich, where are you? Thank you for hosting us. It's lovely here tonight. And I'm just going to do a tiny overview here, maybe about 7 slides, and then Chris and I will talk, and then I promise there will be time for your questions. And since it's a freezing rainy night, I thought I'd start with something near and dear to all of our hearts, the mating rituals of the saltwater crocodile. Just kidding. We're going to talk about online community engagement. So just to tell you what you're dealing with here, this is me. I thought I'd put you at ease by showing you my mullet from high school. And I am a comic book nerd. And this is from the before the internet. I was a comic book nerd. I spent the last 20 years in Silicon Valley working at places like eBay, Zynga, the gaming company, and most recently at Sephora, the global beauty brand. And in that time, I always believed that the internet brought people together through time and space so that they could share their passions. I believe in the positive power of technology. And all the commerce and everything that everyone was using the internet for was interesting. But what really interested me was the human connection that it facilitated. So over the last 20 years, I've perfected the art of getting those people who care about your brand to work with you as a company so that we create a win-win for both your customers or whoever you're trying to engage and for the entity itself. And we can talk about how we do that in just a minute. And I love this field, and I'll tell you also why in a bit. I just moved to Melbourne. Wow! And you know, before you ask, I married a guy from Perth. Trump got elected. We decided to leave the States. So, but I also love marketplaces. Is anyone working in a marketplace or starting a marketplace here? Great. Yeah, you are. I love marketplaces. I cut my teeth at eBay in the early days, and I have a real special spot in my heart for supply and demand side, transaction sides, and I subspecialize in strategic engagement on the supply side. I know I sound American. If I'm going too fast, you are totally welcome to tell me to slow down, okay? Do we have a deal? Okay, and also before you ask, West Coast Eagles. All right. And the thing I miss the most about the States is Mexican food, because it turns out that to have good Mexican food, you need Mexicans. Yeah, okay, but enough about me. Let's hear about you. Let's see a show of hands for those of you tonight who are founders. Are you founders? So look around. All of you look around. Okay, you may put your hands down. Professional services, where are you? Where are you? That's right, founders, you need these people. Look at this. Who is, of you founders or your professional services people, pardon me, who is looking for help? Who's looking for help? Yeah, you need help. Who is seeking work? All right, take a look. Everybody looking for help? Look, come on, keep them up. Keep them up if you're seeking work. These people are here to help you. That's great. See, I'm creating community, right? That's what I'm doing. Who is a friend of mine? Thank you for coming, yeah. And who's here for the free food? Right? And which ones of you are looking to fund the next startup? Oh, too afraid to raise your hand. Well done, well done. Okay, now I'm just gonna go around briefly, and I'm just gonna wave my hand over the audience, and popcorn style, this is what we say in the States, you just pop up and say, if you're a member of a community online that you participate in, not that you run, where are my friends from Sand and Sky? Not the one that you run, but if you're part of one, I want you to tell me what it is. Let's just get 3 or 4 of you coming around over here. Who's part of a community? Who's part of a community? Facebook. Not Facebook. Tell me about your favorite group on Facebook.
It can't be something I run though.
No. Somebody else.
Most recently it's been real estate.
Real estate, great. Okay, what does it give you? Market data?
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else over here? Who? Participate.
Spearfishing.
Say it again.
Spearfishing.
What is that?
Uh,
Like this? Like this kind of thing?
free diving and then shooting fish for food.
Wow. Wow. What do you say? This is Leah, and that was Leah. Anyway, y'all need to hear about her startup. Okay, back in the back. What are you guys participating in online? What? Come on. Yeah, you. Triangle.
It's called the Supper Fest. It's a cycling group.
And what does that give you? What's your name?
Michael.
Michael. What do you get out of that?
Amazing connection with crazy people around the world who do the same thing and think the same idea.
Yeah, isn't the internet wonderful? What about over here? Back there.
I'm part of a community called Weaving, where we meet up weekly, we co-work, we mastermind, support each other's businesses, but we also look at a human from all aspects of mind, body, soul. It's not just
Whoa.
about your work, it's not just about your family, it's about how everything affects everything and works together.
What'd you say your name was?
Mary Lou.
Mary Lou is transforming the way we work, obviously. If you need to talk to her, she's wearing the hat. Anybody else? Yes.
Finance and coffee.
And what do you learn at Finance and Coffee?
Whilst we drink coffee in our offices, we get to, I guess, network, solve problems for each other around lending, around running businesses.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, so those of you who volunteered were willing to tell us what these communities do for you. Let me just check. And thank you for sharing. Does anybody know what these are?
Trilobite.
Wow, Amy, you win. Okay, what is a trilobite?
I don't know. I just know that it's one of the.
That's right.
It's a fossil. It's like a very.
It's a fossil, great, that's good, enough.
Old.
A trilobite is a distant ancestor of the lobster and crab. It lived 500 to 300 million years ago. That's before the dinosaurs were extinguished on the, what was then the ocean floor, okay? They are blind, stupid organisms. But look at this. The most recent discovery, and by the way, trilobites, there's one in every natural history museum. If you go to them, or at least one, there's fossils of them all over the world from every seafloor. So if you go to the Melbourne Museum, you'll see them there. This is the most recent discovery about trilobites. What's happening here? Can anyone tell me?
It's like a bit of community.
They're building a community. That's right. This conga line of these blind creatures helped each other ooze across the seafloor by connecting. They guided each other, even though they were blind. They're blind, single organisms, and they did this for each other. And furthermore, my contention is every living creature seeks to be in community. Every living creature. And if you don't believe me, walk a dog. Because those things are like talking to each other as they sniff the pee of the last dog. I walked a dog yesterday. So here we go. Oops, sorry. So why community and what should we do with our online community? The reason why I work in community is because it marries all the things I love the best about business. Marketing, product, and when I say product, I mean technical product, customer support, always touching the customer, and analytics. And if you haven't figured it out now, I believe data is the new oil. We're all fighting over the data, right? Facebook get an election hacked, we lose our privacy. It's all about the data. When you work in a community or for your community, you can create this virtuous, repeatable cycle that adds value, grows naturally, and is a win-win for both parties. Oops, God, I keep doing that. Okay. And it's never been easier than it is now to connect with the people you want to find to reach your subjects and reach your N. And there's also, am I going to get this right? No. There's a dizzying array of ways to connect with them. And I hope that's why some of you are here. It's like you have an idea, but you don't know where to start. And all I'll say is this. You got to start with one question. what are you trying to achieve by creating or fostering or engaging your community? It goes back to a simple question of what is my goal? And following that, you got to talk about who you want, and the more specific, the better. We have an entrepreneur in the audience tonight who is reinventing how we have our periods, period. So she's gonna go after menstruating women, right? So that's an easy one. And then what you want them to do and how you want them to do it. And the more specific you can be in your goal, the more successful you will be when you launch your community. And before I bore you to tears, I'm just gonna share a little bit about how all communities work. All online communities work this way. Okay, who can tell me what the 80-20 rule is? Anyone? 80-20 rule, yes.
20% makes 80% of the impact.
Exactly. In every online community, 20%, or actually in every business, 20% of your customers yield 80% of your business. And you can call that profits or content or communication. The internet actually collapses that 80-20 rule. These days, more like 1% of your customers comprise about 90% of your sales. I'm sure I'm right on that, right? Who's in retail? Anybody? Okay, so here's what I believe. Here's how to manage a community, actually. You take what's working for the top 20%. You then learn from that, syndicate the lessons downward, and use it as education to pull everybody up. This is the virtuous cycle I was talking about. So if you run an online community and 10 people out of 100 are always talking, it's like, who's the guy with the bike community? There are people who are way more active in there. What is working for them about that? Our job as leaders is to unpack that, liberate it, and syndicate it to everyone else to bring everybody up. And with that, you'll grow naturally. I call this dynamic the Shiramid. That's right. And then what you do actually is named after my first Silicon Valley boss, the great Meg Whitman. You manage the people at the top, Meg, M-E-G, you manage the people at the top. You engage everybody else along the kind of funnel pathway with what you've learned from those people, and then the whole community will grow because you're continuing to promote the stuff that works for the people who it's working the best for. Great, Osiris, how did she do that? The Shiramid. All right, this is my last slide. Everyone in this room has 24 hours amnesty to send me a LinkedIn request. If I get a LinkedIn request in the next 24 hours, I'll know it's you, okay? Otherwise, no, you're cut off. You can also see my all Australia social commentary on Instagram at AussieCita, and on Twitter, where I really only complain about the spam I receive to the Federal Communications Commission. You can follow me at Community Drives. And now it's time for our fireside chat. Thanks, everybody. Which one do you want me at?
Either one, yeah. All right. I'm unsure how we're going to top that, but we'll have a crack.
Talk about salties.
All right. All right. So tonight, if anyone hasn't been here before, we use Slido. You don't need to download anything. Go to slido.com, use that hashtag Shira, and ask your questions in there, and you guys get to upvote or downvote which ones you think should go to the top. All right. So tonight, obviously, I wanted to kind of focus on community as a growth model, and then, but to do that, I want to unpack a little bit about your background first. I think we jumped in straight to the good stuff, but
Couldn't help it.
Yeah, no, good.
Life's
good.
short, start with dessert.
That's good. But just to give a context around, all the wonderful jobs you've had, and then obviously kind of how you pioneered those roles. So let's start with your education. And this was with Paul, no? Was it the company?
It was, yeah.
So this is how we met.
Yes.
We have our chapter director from Bangkok, who's also one of Thailand's biggest VCs, is Shira's mate.
He's a friend of mine from school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both comic book nerds.
Totally.
There you go. So what was the education, and then where'd you go from there?
Well, it actually goes back to college. I have a liberal arts education from uni, and after uni, I became a comic book artist.
Oh, really?
And then I worked at DC Comics, home of Superman and Batman. Yeah! And I thought that my marketing skills at DC Comics were more relevant to the customer than what was happening in comics at the time. And I thought, how can I get these people to listen to me? And somehow I figured out I needed to get an MBA.
Right.
So I did.
Yeah.
And while I was getting my MBA, this little trading company in Silicon Valley heard there was an MBA student with collectible industry experience, and they came and found me. And that's how I ended up at eBay.
eBay was the first big one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they heard that like somebody had worked in comics, which was a big business on eBay at the
Oh, right,
time.
yeah.
And they were like, well, there's an MBA out there who can help us. So they came and got me.
And then so this is the beginning of your love affair with marketplaces.
Love marketplaces.
Yep. And early days at eBay. When are we talking eBay here?
I would prefer not to say.
Okay.
In the 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
The 90s.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. And then, so tell me about eBay and how you kind of morphed into this community role.
Well, as all of you know, eBay was the first major marketplace, and it was all for online marketplace, and it was also the first commercial community at scale. And when I say that, I mean that eBay built from the get-go 150 at that time desktop chat rooms for people to talk to each other long after the transaction was over. In other words, eBay allowed a space for people to build an emotional connection beyond the transactional, okay? Even though I was running businesses at eBay, and I was there for 7 years, I ran several of our vertical businesses. I did business-to-business marketing, business-to-consumer marketing, I did B2B2C marketing, I did it all, and then ended up running eBay's PowerSeller program. The thing that interested me the most about eBay is how the human connection spurred sales. So it's like if you hung out in the classic cars forum all the time and all of you were talking about this brand new 57 Mustang that just came onto the marketplace, it would sell.
How did was that just a top down
Decision?
Yeah, or like just a guess?
I just actually think that it was eBay's way of incorporating the hottest technology at the time. This is going to surprise you, but in my interview question in 1998, in my interview question, eBay said, hey, should we become an ISP, an internet service provider? Because that was the hot technology at the time. Like, would it be cool as a consumer to be Shira at ebay.com as opposed to a Yahoo or .com? And I was like, no, I actually think you ought to stick with the marketplace. And they followed my advice, but just kidding. But anyway, I think they were just integrating the hottest technology. At the time, chat rooms were, AOL was the biggest, the big giant in the room. They were just integrating that.
And then all of a sudden, like you said, they figured out this was going to get
Spur
in.
sales. It took years to measure the impact of online community, but as I said about data, we're like in a post-data reality now. And if you can't measure it, don't do it. Just full stop. And you should be able to measure it because there's a million tools out there to help you measure it. And even Facebook groups have great analytics that are free now.
From eBay, what was the next move?
Well, I knew that I wanted to stay in online community. I was like looking over the fence into the eBay community my whole time there, hoping that I could work on our community, but that was before we had established an ROI. So the closest I got was running the PowerSeller program, which is the group of people who make their living selling on eBay. And that was where I learned how to really take the sales data, and that's where really the 80-20 rule and the Shira kind of crystallized. At eBay at that time, 1%, 0.1% of all sellers constituted 92% of all revenue. 0.1% of eBay sellers at that time was 1,100 people. Like, they would all fit in this corridor here. Like, you could meet them all in an evening. And once we established that through data, we literally, figuratively put them in a room, a digital room, and just really loved them up until they wouldn't go anywhere else. Like, that's basically the pyramid.
The pyramid, yeah.
The pyramid.
Of
So then
course.
after that, I decided I really wanted to pursue online community, and went to a couple of startups in financial services and here and there, and then ended up running Zynga's global gaming community. This is the gaming company responsible for Farmville and Words with Friends and poker, so I apologize, but because it's highly addictive. But I ended up running an online community on Facebook primarily of 300 million fans on 120 pages in 17 languages.
Wow.
Yeah.
And were they very early on with community thinking
Huge.
too? Yeah.
Well, actually, all gaming is anybody in gaming here? Or I know you're all gamers, you nerds. But if anybody's in gaming and like the kind of comic booky kind of communities were the first people to use the web because they're such nerds. But so gaming from way back always had a forum where you could meet other people to play with, and that's good for business.
Yeah.
Because if it's sticky to you and you're meeting people, then you're like, hey, let's go and conquer that whatever together. Zynga at the time, was built on the Facebook platform, so it grew exponentially along with Facebook, and that's how we got that incredible size, 300 million.
And I remember I used to play the poker.
Yeah.
I love playing poker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I reached out and wanted to brand their tables. To tell you that.
We
Yeah.
should have
Yeah.
done that. Great idea.
Yeah, but with that, so who was it? Were they already selling virtual goods? From
Okay.
the
So
start?
that was the business model.
Yeah.
Zynga's business model was selling you cows to put on your farm on your screen, and they were virtual. And that's where I was able to take the kind of lessons of the pyramid and apply them in a massively distributed social format. So it's all about contextual content. Who's in content here? All of us, basically. So it's all about contextual content. What I would do is go to Farmville and be like, Farmville's Facebook page, and say, hey farmers, we got a purple cow back here, $2. And even though that was like dead stock or not new and shiny, anybody who didn't have the purple cow and was a completist felt like they had to buy it. And so we drove $12 million of incremental revenue just by posting to social. And it was a win-win. It's not like I was forcing anyone to buy, but I was like, you may not have seen, we have a purple cow, come and add it to your collection. And all those $2 added up.
Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed you can't really play games on Facebook anymore. I think
It is a shame. Yeah. It is a shame.
So they just kind of cut you guys off.
Well, it's all about money.
Yeah.
Like we were eclipsing and we were fighting for the customer, and it ended up being bad business on both sides.
So Zynga, you're right there in the middle of everything, just going like nuts.
Really fun.
Yeah, we had is it David, Daniel, Pincus,
Mark.
Mark.
Yeah.
I'm not even. We're close, very close. We had him talk at Startup Grind. So yeah, I know a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Was he just, can you just talk a little bit, like I'm just a bit off topic here, but the scale, what was it like being amongst that scale, and like you're just rocking up to work and there's
300 million.
people that you don't know, like.
You mean online?
Yeah,
like
just
customer
Zynga
scale?
or both. Yeah.
Ooh, well, I think having survived 20 years in Silicon Valley and thrived, really, what you want is explosive growth. But growth comes with change. And change is not easy for humans. Like, that's hard. So it took a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to embrace change, always, as a practice. So like living through eBay's explosive growth, I was like the 200th employee. And when I left, there were 2,500, and now there are 20,000. So
Yeah.
that was then. And the similar story with Zynga. I was around 250, and I mean, like, we were 12,000 by the time I left, and mostly by acquisition. We grew by acquisition. And there was change, so much change. And by then I was so comfortable with change that every time we made an acquisition or made a decision or whatever, I really used it as an opportunity to serve the community. And I think they realized that.
And then do you kind of, are you kind of testing just to like a certain number of community members? How are you rolling out?
Yeah, that's a very insightful question. So those of you, I mean, community can be used, and I hope you'll ask questions. Online community can be used for a lot of outcomes. You can use it to beta test, you can use it to road test new ideas, etc. And it's always a good idea to start smaller with either your most precious customers or your most forgiving customers. And you always call it a test in case you fail, because you will. And yeah, we did a lot of that. And we did a lot of like exploring, like what I said before is one of the things I love about working in online community is that it's all about the customer. And it gave me an opportunity as a leader to just forever dip her in and send someone an email, can I speak to you on the phone? Or do a little survey to a small group of people. Throw 100 people into a smaller group and just talk to them about a specific change, or really get their partnership and support as you changed and grew and moved.
How can you just talk about the evolution? And I'm mindful that there's some people don't have a community. They think about building a community. There's professional community builders here.
Yeah.
So try and cover a bit of everything here. But can you talk about how the community scaled globally? Was it just very US centric, and then as you grew out, you had to like appoint community leaders how did it work?
When I joined, we had 6 live games, and when I left, we had 35 live games. And the 6 live games quickly turned to 10. And we had a great model where the community manager was embedded in that studio for that specific game. So we quickly grew to that. And then like 2.5 years in, we localized the game in 7 languages. So, or maybe 12 actually. We started with 7, then to 12. So then we got sophisticated. So every new game that we launched, we'd launch with the English page, and then French, Italian, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Turkish, and depending on the kind of game it was, Chinese, Japanese, etc. So we ended up being strategic about how we like put the stake out there and then grew toward it.
Yeah.
And you incentivize. There's community gaming theory by a great scientist. He started a software company called Lithium Software. You can find him online. I think his name is Daniel Wu, and he talks about how it's great to incentivize that first action. Yep. And then if people find intrinsic value in your community, they'll keep coming back. We have a community founder here named Jenny. Where's Jenny? Who started a Facebook community for women entrepreneurs in Melbourne. And this is like the people who participated in her community are like, I found my people. Like they may have stumbled into it somehow, but then they're like, these are the people I can relate to.
And again with the globalization and how do you manage the nuances between the Turkish Farmville community, right? And then the Portuguese.
First let's talk about managing the nuances between the Turkish employee and the Portuguese employee.
Sure.
That was nuanced, but actually, if you have a good community manager, they are actually showing up to work to represent what the Turkish players care about. And then if they are working successfully, they will actually present that strategically to the company so that the company listens and responds with something that the Turks will love. So like the couple of times that we celebrated German holidays in the game, we had, multi-million-dollar days on those days in the German version of the game.
Right.
When you give the community, when you recognize them, people just want to be seen.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, and then moving on from, I'm just going through the CV at the moment, and then we'll get into the community-specific questions. From Zynga, tell me what was next. What was? I want to get to Sephora.
Yeah, great. I did my first crowdsourced platform, financial services and community, it's very difficult. I've done a few of those. I then became a consultant, which is what I do now, and I decided to test the Pyramid as a consultant against every vertical I could find. And fortunately in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco.
Is this trademarked?
The Pyramid?
Yeah.
By viewing the Pyramid, you agree that you are under a non-disclosure agreement.
Is that?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So-
I didn't know I thought we were just special to get the first one to see it, but this has been work in progress
You're
for
just
years.
the third people to see it.
Okay.
So anyway, where was I? So I went to consumer packaged goods. I then decided I needed to test the Pyramid against every vertical so that I could be ready for any client. And I got to tell you that, like, no matter the vertical, whether it be education, business to consumer, business to business, healthcare, the model holds. It holds in marketplaces, and it holds in marketplaces of ideas and marketplaces of people's content. So I'm delighted to tell you that it works across many verticals. I did consulting for a while, and then I decided, okay, well, I miss being around people all the time, and heard that Sephora was looking for a community leader. And I am one of those jerks from Silicon Valley who was living in San Fran and thinking, like, why would you ever work in retail when you could work in technology? And I didn't know anyone at Sephora. I just applied online, and they answered. they called me, and I didn't know that they had invested $10 million. That it was the biggest investment in 3 years to turn a very small desktop-only 20,000 person community that sat kind of outside of Sephora.com to make it native to the mobile app and to add all these features, like an Instagram feature and a chat feature and reviews, which drives the entire business of Sephora, all into the community. And they hired me to launch it.
Very cool.
Anybody wanting to talk about lipstick, gush about lipstick, let's talk afterward.
Fantastic. I want to dig deep into the Sephora thing, but I want to just kind of sidestep to the consulting bit. And I imagine there were some conversations when you're talking to these, consumer brands around even the necessity to be thinking about community. Maybe they had the page or whatever. So
yes,
I just want to.
I'm so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
So, for those of us who do this work, and it's nascent. It doesn't live in a clear bucket. Is it marketing? Is it PR? Is it customer support? It's emerging as the technology to service a community, an online community, is emerging. And I'm very, very happy that I chose to focus totally on this because, as I said before, it marries up all the things I like the best about the internet. So typically, community is your retention strategy. Growth typically has its own set of rules and demands in a marketplace. But once you have some customers, boy oh boy, there are ways to keep them forever and make them feel like they're cheating on you if they shop anywhere else or go anywhere else. So there's ways to really draw people in, and as I showed in the Pyramid, it becomes a virtuous cycle. If you have intrinsic value in the content and programming that you're offering in your community, it will grow naturally. Now there are ways to accelerate that growth through growth type tactics like creating, doing social advertising against a Facebook group to make it grow faster or to make the product grow faster. But truly you have to be offering intrinsic value for it to work.
And how do you kind of make a case for ROI or these kind of things?
Yeah. So every executive wants to know that. And as I said before, if you cannot measure it, don't do it. And there are creative ways to measure it. So in communities where you're buying community software, like Salesforce's Community Cloud or what was called Lithium software, there's gamification. There's the gamification built into the software that as people contribute, they move up in kind of like this social ladder. And so you may not be able to prove that it equaled 100,000 sales, But you can show the exec that 100,000 people went from level bronze to level silver, which means our engagement is growing as a fraction of growth. And so you have to be creative about, you may have to be creative about what you can measure, but once you do, that's basically your ticket in, right? If you can speak the currency of ROI, whatever that may be. Sometimes the executives want community for the sake of engagement, full stop. Sometimes they want more sales. Sometimes they want other things. Sometimes they want to save money on customer support by having the community answer each other's questions. That's very common in like Apple's online community. That's all it is. It's very common in tech and telecom. So it depends on what you want. So it's like, okay, if last week 300 questions were marked answered satisfactorily by another community member, and this week 3,000 questions were answered, marked, then you grew in that, going back to whatever your goal was,
Yep.
ROI. So like in Silicon Valley, I used to go around and say, I'm the only community person that guarantees an ROI. And what that means is I just know what to measure to show you that your investment is working out.
Right, and you might need to be a bit clever about that. It's I was having the conversation with Celso, and I remember that you mentioned too that I think it was the Tesla group.
Oh, huge.
Right, where he would say that they would invite customers that were thinking about making a purchase into the group first.
That's right.
You want to talk about that, the Tesla a bit?
So a Tesla is not an inexpensive purchase, and Tesla buyers are, I'll make a gross generalization here, looking for ways to justify the expense. Okay, so what they do is they go online and tell potential Tesla buyers how awesome their decision was, and boy, you should see the wings on that car when you open the door. And what that's called is social proofing. You guys have heard of social proofing, right? So if I have $150,000 to burn and I'm thinking about buying a Tesla, Tesla's like, absolutely, go to the community, ask all your questions there. And that is millions of dollars of marketing that they don't have to spend. And like I can go meet a room full of strangers, just like our friend in the bike community, who are going to actually sell me the next big helmet on their own. A helmet company, all they have to do is like just say thank you, really. So it's called social proofing. That's a great use of community if you have a product that people love. Stephanie over here, who runs this incredible Aussie skincare company, social proofing is a huge part of their brand and their Instagram. People are bananas for her product. I recommend it. That people recommend. I love her product. So like that's a huge part of it.
And then Facebook, and this is all kind of evolving, right? Because the features keep changing and stuff.
Yeah,
but I think
totally.
for anyone that's thinking about a community that hasn't started yet, we had this conversation before where Facebook's kind of enabled you, right? It's lowered any barriers to entry just to you can create a Facebook group.
Yes. So I get this question all the time. Should we use Facebook? Well, yes. First of all, right now it's free. It's a great way to grow. It's a great way to get the word out. Facebook, in addition to leaking all of the Americans' personal information to the Russians, they also made a great investment in their group software for exactly the reasons why all of you mentioned your favorite Facebook group. Because if you are coming back because of an emotional connection to something, you're stuck. Your eyeballs are gonna stay, which means your dollars are gonna stay, and it's a very safe and positive thing for Facebook to invest in, because you wanna reconnect with your high school class of whatever and see their babies and whatever they're doing. I wanna reconnect with all my coworkers back in the States. I wanna see all this stuff, and that's good content for me. So the groups drive the content, which drives the eyeballs, which drives the dollars. So it's a great time to use Facebook, to have a great Facebook group, and they have very recently launched idiot-proof features that make moderating and managing a Facebook group a lot easier.
And this is like proving so impactful that like Mark Zuckerberg's come out and said like community is a big focus, like
Well, I mean,
I mean, it
yes,
always
I'm going to
has,
say
but
yes,
now,
and,
yeah,
but like
yeah.
he finally grokked the idea that what I started with in my talk, which is, okay, like here's this thing that unites people through time and space for positive. So how might we focus on the positive for this company that's in hot water? Well, actually, we're connecting people through time and space. Connecting people with shared passions through time and space, which is a beautiful thing. So, and it makes money too, because it brings the eyeballs, it brings people.
So jumping around again, Sephora. Let's go back there for a little bit. Tell me some of the wins there and just some of the learnings that can be used for
I
the
would love
entrepreneurs.
to talk about it all day. After managing gaming communities that were really all about killing each other, to walk into a beauty community, I mean, it is the nicest place on the internet. Like, people would come in and be like, I don't know, should I wear this purple lipstick? And 1,000 people would be like, you go, girl. Like, so, I mean, it was like the nicest place on the internet. I learned more after being that jerk who only wanted to work in technology. I learned more from this retail community about beauty than I've learned from anyone else. I was talking to somebody earlier, maybe Amy, who's got a community of communities, a network of communities on Facebook, about how to keep the trolls out. Well, the Sephora community had their own way of burying trolls. If someone was getting catty, they would all start posting pictures of llamas, drama llamas, and just like bury the comment. And like nobody said anything, nobody name called. They were just like, oh, here's a llama, and here's a llama, and here's a llama, and here's a llama. So, I mean, they taught me so much. Now, you know, the downside is, because it was so nice, they didn't even have a trolling policy. They didn't have anything that protects people, and so we came in and we created that immediately. Because as communities grow, you know, in every 100 people, there's 1 or 2 bad actors. You gotta protect the people who are there for the good stuff. So that's a big part of the work. But the other things I learned are just like, really the reason why I do the work in the first place. If I believe, which I do, that the internet unites people through time and space to share passion, beauty is one of those things that unites. It cuts across, and it cuts across all the things that bother us the most. It cuts across race. It now totally cuts across gender. I mean, I'm like getting goosebumps just telling you about, during my tenure at Sephora, we started, non-specific gender forums for people who are transitioning. So, like, we created the space for this safe conversation to happen, and I'm just deeply proud of that. Beauty is universal. Parts of beauty are universal, no matter what level you are. If you buy your lipstick at Chemist Warehouse or if you buy it at Sephora in Mecca, like it really unites.
You've opened a bunch of questions there, and I'm going to make sure I get to some of these too.
Yay.
For me, the one that kind of came through right there was about culture. You know, the llama, for example, which is great. For people that are like just trying to get a community established, or we had this conversation before, so I love this stuff. How are they getting established? You know, putting that purpose, their values up, their rules.
Right.
How do you create that, foster that, and then, but give people the room to breathe or to create their own, llama?
Yeah, right. That is so important, especially in this era of such insidious and predatory behavior on the web. So, like, again, this room of people believes that the internet unites. Well, it's also universal, and like I said, there's some bad actors out there. They're always going to try to prey on someone. So the great thing about running a community is that you get to make the rules, but you have to stand by them. You have to enforce them. And now, even on Facebook, like, I joined a couple of groups, like tidying up and organizing and house cleaning groups recently. And before I was allowed in, I had to answer 3 questions. And it was like, why do you like housekeeping? What's your favorite product? And do you promise to abide by the following rules? So like you agree to terms. So like the most sophisticated community leaders are in contact with their terms and conditions and their legal team and what we call T's and C's in the States all the time to make sure that the people who want to be there for the right reasons are protected against the trolls, okay? Then when a troll comes in, you cannot be afraid to boot them out. And it sends a great message like, oh, hey, at Satan666. We don't fat bash here. Actually, we believe everyone is beautiful here. So you are invited to leave, and I'm going to cancel your IP so that you can never come back. That kind of thing. So like you just can't be afraid of that. And I think, you know, if I had to look at the trajectory of my career in community, yes, you have to have a very thick skin. Yes, you have to have a rubber backbone to anticipate change. But you also have to, like, as RuPaul would say, don't write a check with your mouth that your ass can't cash. You got to stand by what you say. So if I say no trolling, I'm going to be hardline about that. No trolling.
Right. So this is an interesting one. So I already know the answer, but in the world of beauty and Sephora, I imagine there would be some pretty powerful influencers in there that might test that line. What do you do there?
I'm so glad you asked me. I'm the guest.
I already know the answer.
I'm the guest who says,
yeah.
The internet is in a chokehold from influencers now, and the consumer is getting smart. They understand that an influencer is a paid advertisement now, no different from a commercial. Okay, everybody gets that now. So we're at peak influencer. This is it. Enjoy it while you can because it's almost over. So everyone is searching for sincerity. And so Sephora actually really disinvited influencers. It was really a very democratic mass of beauty lovers. And anybody who came in to build their own profile, like outside of Sephora, was just kind of made to feel unwelcome. It just wasn't what it was about. Now, on the other hand, Sephora corporate works with influencers and does like they launch products together and stuff. And in those cases, we would very transparently invite beauty expert Chris to come talk to the Sephora community under our auspices, you know, for these 2 hours on this specific day, invited in, shown the door on the way out. Yeah. Because they'd be tempted to come in and do customer acquisition on our dime.
Right.
Which is not cool, right? We're more the host.
That's good. In and out.
Yeah, that's right. The door is here.
Let me get some of these questions here. How do you measure the direct impact of community strategies on sales and / revenue?
Okay, I assume this is coming from someone who is like more or less starting up or lobbying to start up a community in an organization. At first, it's very difficult because you actually have to use that data, which you will have to beg someone to give to you manually in many cases, so that you can take the proof to the CEO to get funding to have the data integrated. Does that make sense? So at the beginning, there's no other way, unless you're also in command of the tech team or the product organization who builds the community so that the back end is connected and your customers all have a single sign-on. There's no way to measure it. Well, you'll end up having to do a data dump and getting an analyst to, like, among other things, match the user ID or the email address to the customer email address to see whether or not those who are using community are also spending more. If revenue, if you want to clarify your question, whoever asked it, that's cool. If not, I hope I answered it. It usually starts manually until you have a proof.
And then just randomly, we're all here tonight, right? And you know, CMX is a big advocate for offline, right?
Yes.
And I know that Atlassian's got some data around them getting their community together offline and how that impacts sales.
Huge.
Online.
Yes.
How are you measuring offline, online, and making the case there?
Offline is actually a lot harder to measure unless you're doing customer acquisition through offline. So you can go to, let's just talk about Leah's menstrual focused startup. So like, gosh, where might you go to meet a bunch of women over the age of 12? Like, that's your community. But that's an offline endeavor. And unless you are just measuring people who downloaded the app or made a first purchase after that event, that's hard science. So once you have a community, you have to be creative again, going back to like, what is ROI and how do we measure it? You know, maybe at an offline community event, you give everyone a referral code that they can pass to a friend, and you measure the referral codes. We did that at eBay in the early days. But really, if I can impart to you, like, who are you trying to get? Go find them. They may not be online. You have to go to where they are or create the space for them to be there. And you know what? Food really helps. Just feed them.
And what about these, like, you know, if anyone's not in the Startup Grind Facebook group, please join it. Those, you know, that initial bit where it's like you're the only one that gives a shit about this, right? and getting it through to where, like, oh, you know, so-and-so's commenting now and they're having a conversation and I wasn't even in there.
Yes.
How do you kind of accelerate, I guess, that formation, you know?
Yeah, one way to do it could be just positive reinforcement. Like for, say, the
Debbie,
leader.
yes, thank you.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
For you to helicopter back in and be like, you know, at Shira Levine, I'm so glad you lent your expertise to this question. You know, that kind of thing. And then you could keep the conversation going. It's like being a good host by saying, who else has this? Or, you know, you've now seen on Facebook in particular, there's those kind of like backgrounds that you can like just write text. And this is something that Jenny does with her entrepreneur community. She just kind of poses a question. Like, you know, or you guys see it all the time. Hey, everyone, I'm going on vacation. What should I binge watch? You've all seen those. That's like, you know, you just pose a question and you can have some engagement off of that.
How do you measure the direct impact of community strategies? Oh, we did that. Let's go. Shira, you advise managing customers at the top 20% or less. Do you have any strategies for startups who feel like they should nurture every customer? That was upvoted quite a bit.
Okay. I'm like, first let's define the customer base of a startup. If you have 1,000 people using your thing, you can't, like, it's not enough people. You actually have to make love to all of them. And it's kind of the spaghetti model. It's just so small that it's like you throw everything at them, and the ones who respond, and it's like, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You can chunk them out in 100-person tests or whatever, invite them to do in smaller groups. But when you're small, you actually have to just keep waiting until you've hit on something that you feel works, and then continue to optimize that. So that's one strategy. But when you're bigger, it will be crystal clear to you who's in the top 20%, either because you've mapped it back to sales or whatever your ROI is, or because, like the guy in the bicycle community, they're the ones talking all the time and like creating great content. At Sephora, in our 20,000 person desktop community, one contributor created 30% of our total content. One person. And when one person, she lives in Canada. And when I walked in, I was like, so who are these people to my team? And everybody was like, oh, Veronica 57, thorn in our side. I was like, well, have you ever met her? No way. I was like, get her on the phone. I mean, she's like creating all the content that everyone is coming for. So like I said, let's invite her to dinner. I want her to sit right here. In fact, I want to sit on her lap because she is our most valuable customer. So like this stuff will emerge. It emerges over time. And you know, it may take not machine learning, but human learning to really study, if it's just a community, who's contributing the most. Then maybe you want to like step out and say, hey, at so-and-so, maybe you'd like to be our volunteer moderator. And they'd be like, I can't believe you asked me. I've been waiting to have a leadership position. And then what you do, you send them a mug for Christmas every year. You say thank you, like you mean it. And they love doing it.
I remember, so CMX had some stats around, there's just going to be people in your community that they're just passive.
Yes.
They're just, you can't.
That's why that's the 80-20 rule. So
They just want to what? They just want to.
So a tactic there is if you're learning why Veronica 50, what about Sephora's community made Veronica 57 contribute so much? I talk to her monthly, and as the leader of the department, it was worth it to invest the time because she was 30% of our content. I mean, that is a huge number. So she was maybe injured on the job, had workers' comp, was a beauty fanatic, and this was her happy place. This gave her relief from whatever reality she was facing, which she never really told me about. That was fine. And, she was our MVP, our most important customer, really.
Take one last question here. How do you know your online community is successful? What measure matters most? I suppose this is.
Did my prior ROI question answer that? Whoever asked it or not? You want to tweak it? You're allowed to speak up. Okay. Yeah, we get a thumbs up, Chris.
Yep. All right, and then. Well, I think we covered these. So I guess what's your parting words for people that haven't took the leap, and then one for that are in the trenches, and it gets to you after a while managing communities.
Yeah.
So a bit of both. Bit of
Yes.
advice for both of those people.
Okay, so for those who are, let's start with what you asked last first. For those of you who are managing communities, and it is tough, it's tough out there. Just remember that you have created a space where someone feels safe enough to complain. And that they are taking the time to complain means they care about what you're doing. And that should keep you going the whole time. So just change everyone. There's a germ of good feedback in every negative barb. Now, when it gets personal, you just kick them out. Shira says, kick them out. Like this, hey, at Satan 55666, we don't fat bash here. We don't. We believe everyone is beautiful. That's all you need to remember. Here are the rules. Click this. You'll see our rules. They're posted. So you got to make sure your rules are ironclad, but also, you just can't tolerate the bad. And what was your first question?
People that have come and they're thinking about starting a community.
Think about starting a community. Well, I would go back to what I said at the beginning, which is this. Why do you want to start a community? What do you think it's going to bring to the company? How are you thinking about proving the ROI? If it's not pure sales because you don't have the data, what else can you use? And you can, those of you with Instagram accounts really know, the team from Sand and Sky know what kind of content on their Instagram feed gets more clicks and likes than the stuff that doesn't. At Sephora, we were in the community over here, and we were all about all these beautiful women from all over the place who were posting pictures of each other and trying on makeup and showing. And every so often, we'd get one of our community members in our Instagram feed, which we thought was a major win, but nobody clicked. It actually turns out the people on Instagram only want to see product. So it's like you kind of got to know. Instagram was more of like a showcase catalog for Sephora. This is where the real conversation happened, and that was great. It's a defensible strategy.
Want everyone back on their feet again. Come on. And a big thank you to Shira for joining us tonight.
Thank you.